Hello. Let's take a look at Chapter 3 today in our textbook, Interests and Goals. This is a short textbook. It's only about 10 chapters, I believe. And each one has a critical component of the conflict process. So the first chapter had that critical definition that you've got to understand. Chapter 2 gave you some perspectives. Chapter 3 here is really getting into the nitty-gritty of it now, interests and goals. If you don't know what your goals are in a conflict, if you don't know what the goals of the other party are, you have a very difficult time reaching a resolution to the conflict. So you've got to have a good handle on these. All right, most people cannot identify their goals accurately. Often there's an incompatibility in goals. That's just part of what's wrong. In fact, usually your goals are incompatible, or at least there's a perception that they're incompatible. And you need to, literally, I like to list these things. What do you want? What do you want? On a piece of paper. And if you can put these goals down on a piece of paper or talk about them, you can recognize, oh, your goals are different than mine and they're incompatible. We can't have both. Now we're starting to make some progress in the conflict. People have multiple goals in conflict. It's not just one goal. That's what the bulk of this chapter is about. And often we don't even recognize what our goals are until we get into the middle of a conflict and actually start trying to resolve it. And goals can change as well. So I've got a nice picture here of the little girl. Her goal is to get that rainbow, reaching out and grabbing it. Sometimes we don't get what we want with our goals, but often we probably realize that in going through the conflict, and goals can shift. The conflict's real. Something's happening that is can be pinned down by that definition of incompatible goals, scarce resources, interference. But often we can't really pin it down until we're in the middle of the conflict and start thinking constructively about it, not reacting emotionally to the conflict out of anger or fear or whatever, but actually engaging in the conflict and starting to think deliberately about what is it I want in this conflict. There are 4 kinds of goals. The book uses an acronym, TRIP, T-R-I-P, if that will help you remember it. Topic, relationship, identity, and the process. Topical goals, relationship goals, identity goals, who am I, and process goals. Let's look at each one of those in some detail. What do we want? That's the topic goal. What to do, where to go, how to allocate the resources. These topic goals are typically objectifiable, and they are the easiest goals to see and discuss. And I love that picture there. He thinks the problem is one thing. Look, something's wrong with the engine here, but really you're in 2 feet or 3 feet of water, and engines just stall when they're in that deep of water, usually because the exhaust can't get out and it blocks up the engine. So knowing what these topical goals are, they're easy to identify, put on the table, and if all conflict were just topical goals, it would be relatively easy to resolve. But things get more complicated than that because of these other goals. The first are relationship goals. Who are we to one another? Relationship goals can include things like that. I need respect from you. I need to know your commitment level to this organization or to this marriage, this relationship. I need public support from you. That's a goal of who we are to each other. Do you have my back when something is public, something is out there, and are you sticking by me, or are you throwing me under the bus? Do you abuse me in some way, verbally, physically, just taking advantage of me, not telling me everything that's going on that I need to know, just neglecting who I am? Is there some kind of abuse going on? These relationship goals are typically under the surface. They're difficult to discuss openly, emotionally difficult often, and they're typically at the heart of all conflicts. Do not say to yourself, well, there's no relationship goal in this one. Yeah, there probably is if you analyze it a little bit. It doesn't mean they're really difficult to resolve, but they're there and they are very important. I like this little cartoon here. where she says to him, you have a 30-year mortgage, a 5-year car lease, and a lifetime gym membership, but you're afraid of commitment? Their conflict here is a relationship goal. Who are we to each other? The relationship is getting deeper, and she would like it to go deeper. He's making excuses of why he doesn't want it to go deeper. This isn't a topical goal about whether or not it should go deeper, but who are they to one another? Does she want that meaningful, deep relationship of conversation and sharing life together? Maybe he just wants to sleep with her and he doesn't want those other things. The relationship goals can clarify what the real problem is. Identity goals are next. I've got a couple slides on this when they get a little more complex, and we're getting more complex as we get into this chapter here. Recognize that as you read it. Who am I in this interaction? That's what an identity goal is about. And in conflict, I try to protect my self-identity, and as this conflict gets more intense, I'm probably going to shift over to an identity goal, especially when you start escalating the conflict in some way. If you raise your voice to me, I'm not going to let you treat me like that. And so all of a sudden we're shifting away from a topic goal, and we're in the middle of an identity goal here. We tend to become less flexible and more destructive as conflicts escalate and shift and we get into the identity goal problems. Read this section of the chapter closely. There's a nice list of symptoms to let you know when these conflicts are moving in this direction. And clarifying who we are to each other is just essential for resolving conflict. That has to be clear and established. And sometimes we don't like how it's clarified, where the boss says, look, I own this company, I'm going to run it my way. What you want here, I understand that, but I am the boss and you are the employee. Well, that boss is clarifying the goal, and in one sense it's settling the identity issue, and you realize that boss has power. Although the employee may talk back to the boss and say, well, you know, I'm a very skilled employee, you need people with my skill to fire me and hire somebody else to retrain them to the specifics of your company. If you can get somebody that really has this same skill, I am valuable to you. And so we're wanting to have our identity clarified as a valuable employee to the boss. And so if you can talk about and clarify these things, these issues, if they arise, have to get passed before you can go back to those topic goals that perhaps this started with. Other ideas about some of these symptoms of identity goals are: we claim that injustice, people are picking on me. We refuse to back down from our position in any way. We sometimes even refuse to admit there's a conflict. What? I don't have a problem, you've got a problem here. There's a conflict, we all know it, but you've taken it at the level of identity, and this is just one tactic that people use. Drawn a line here under that one to separate these last 3 bullet points here. When we're addressing identity goals, three ways to do this here. One is to try to increase the self-esteem of this other person. Let them know they're valuable to you. Let them know they're valuable to the organization, to the company. Don't put them down in any way or diss them. Increase self-esteem, and that helps us get past identity goals. See, we're interdependent, or we wouldn't be having a conflict. And if there's interdependence, we need that person in some way, and there is a self-esteem issue there that you've got to recognize that they're valuable. Listen to people. That does a lot to increase their self-esteem and let them feel they're important to you. Remember, this is about who are we in this situation, who are we, well, relationship is to one another, but in this situation. And don't dictate, don't give orders, don't, especially if you're the boss here in a conflict with an employee, don't just start giving orders and using power. That tends to lower that self-esteem and shift their perception of who you think they are. And the conflict can get deeper that way and probably not move towards a resolution. Okay, the 4th type of goal is a process goal. This section's a little simpler. What will work best to resolve this conflict? Do we just discuss this and try to come up with solutions? Do we just take a vote? It's an organizational conflict of some sort and there's 20 people involved. Let's vote to decide what to do. Who gets to talk? Who gets to talk the most? People with more power tend to get more talk time than people with lower power. So the boss gets to talk 2/3 of the time in a meeting, and everybody else shares that final 1/3, and you might get to say 2 or 3 sentences. Are we going to give more talk time to everybody? Are we going to delegate a subgroup to make a decision on how to resolve this? Kids, you 2 kids go in there and you decide where the family is going on vacation, and then we're doing that. Do we try to reach a consensus as a group and just really back to discussion and just talk this through until we understand one another, till we've resolved relationship and identity issues, and we can get back to the topic goals that perhaps initiated the conflict? All right, these goals can overlap, recognize that, and they can have different weights to you. I've drawn the circles here, different sizes. There's a couple of diagrams in the book and some lengthy explanations. Look at those. Topical goals may seem to be the most important thing. Here, a young woman is asking her boss for a raise. She's written out the reasons for her raise on a sheet of paper. He's considering those while she waits for his decision. Topic, getting the raise. We have relationship and identity issues that are overlapping with that. If I'm going to continue to work here a long time, I need to make enough money that I can survive, and it has to do with our relationship with one another. Are you going to be supportive of me? And or perhaps I simply need the opportunity to move up in the company. Who are we to each other here, the relationship? Identity goals. You know, how much money you make at your job says a lot about how you feel about yourself, your own self-esteem. And if you're not well paid, if you don't not make enough money, you start wondering, am I just a flunky down here that works at the lower levels for low pay? And so identity does get wrapped in this. These goals do overlap. And then we've got a process goal. I've drawn it outside of the circle here. It's not overlapping at this point, because asking the boss for the raise is pretty straightforward. You go into the boss's office, you are making a request. The boss, if they are reasonable, will consider it. Other bosses just tell you to get out of the office. We don't discuss that. The process is probably pretty well set within the organization, so the goal may not overlap here. How you handle the process may not be a goal at all. What is the real goal? And I've kind of drawn here this dark area at the bottom of the slide here. Topic conflicts, topical goals tend to be the ones we talk about first. They're easy to see and discuss. We notice them. They often initiate a conflict, but really under the surface there may be either a relationship goal or an identity goal that is really driving the conflict. An example might be my wife and I disagree about where to go on vacation, and I've said we are going to Colorado for vacation. We're going to visit my relatives, and we are going to have a good time because it's beautiful there and my relatives are nice people. And my wife wants to go to Ohio and visit some old friends on vacation, and Ohio's nice, and we get into this topical conflict, and as we discuss, as we work towards a resolution, I began to stop just telling her this is what we're doing. I run the family, I make the most money, so that's how it is. And I stop and I listen to her and I hear her out, and I say finally, okay, I understand why you want to go to Ohio, and I can appreciate that, and I'll have a good time on that vacation as well. I've got friends there. So yes, let's go to Ohio. And then my wife says, surprisingly, well, no, let's go to Colorado. We can do that. And all of a sudden, she seems to have flip-flopped in the conflict. Well, it wasn't about the topic necessarily. She may have just felt that I was trying to put her one down in the relationship or in her identity of who we are to one another and who we are in the situation. And just being heard and being understood and being respected made enough difference that was at the real heart of the conflict. Not about where we go on vacation. We're going to have a good time in both places, and we'll go to the other place the next year, or maybe we can even sneak in 2 vacations. There are collaborative solutions to this, there are compromises, but if we can settle the relationship issue, all of a sudden that topical issue may even take care of itself if the real conflict is at the relationship level. Okay, goals change in the process often. We have prospective goals, what you think your goal is when you're going into a conflict. Once you're into it deep enough to even think about goals and discuss them and decide what they are. And so with the conflict over where to go on vacation, I think it's a topical conflict about where we go for vacation. And I have all my logical reasons of why we should go here, and maybe I'm willing to compromise going into this. But those prospective goals happen before or as we're starting the conflict. They can change during the conflict, as what I've talked about here, the transactive goal, realizing that it was a relationship goal that was driving this conflict all along, and we realized that going through the conflict, we shifted the discussion, and our where to go on vacation goals actually changed because we realized the relationship is so much more important than the topic. And so things shifted. Then there's retrospective goals. Once a conflict is resolved, for better or worse, hopefully better, one way or the other, through collaboration, compromise, we look back and we say, now, give me some perspective on this. Yeah, the relationship goal, it really was the most important thing. And even we start talking to ourselves a little bit. Going to visit my relatives, well, that's important, but it's more important to have a solid marriage and keep things really solid here. So we did the right thing. That should have been my goal all along. Okay, finally here, the end of the chapter talks about clarifying your goals and collaborative goals. And in clarifying your goals, I just encourage you, as you enter into conflict, whether you're sitting down at a table having coffee, discussing it, write things down. Try to identify your goals, write them down, what they are. Recognize you've got relationship and identity goals. Maybe talk about the process even as you start. And actually, you probably did if you're sitting down at the table having some coffee. You've engaged in a process here, but maybe discuss that more in depth. Once you clarify your goals, they become easier to see, possible to reach. You can reach them more easily. It's easier to change your goals once you start writing down what the topic goals are. Relationship goals, those can be difficult to discuss, but if you can get that on the table, who are we to each other? Well, you're a valuable employee in this company. I do not want to lose your service. It is too difficult to replace you. And so once a boss starts saying those kinds of things out loud, then maybe the employee's a lot more flexible in how the topical issue gets cleared up, knowing there's respect and the identity there. Face has been saved. I forgot to mention that key concept about face with identity goals. People don't want to look bad. They want to save face. And so as you think about identity goals, keep that in mind. Sometimes people just keep fighting because they'll look bad if they lose, or you've already said so many mean things about them, they're just not ready to come to really collaborate with you yet until the face issue is resolved and you show some respect for them. Okay, back here, clarifying the goals. It's easier to change goals if you just clarify what they are, and writing them down really helps to do that. Now, making your goals collaborative is the aim, is the goal of good conflict management. Setting out a timeline. Okay, we've got short-term goals, mid-term goals, and long-term goals. Short-term are, let's resolve the little topic here at work. How do we do this job the best way, the most profitably? But those mid-term goals are, how well are we working to one another? Are you sticking with the company, or do I fire you? And then long-term goals may have to do more with long-term relationships typically. And so getting these, writing them down, but then recognizing these goals, and the goals can shift over time as you go through a conflict process. Talk about doable goals. And these collaborative things, this is the way you talk about the conflict becomes important here. Doable goals. Talk about things that are actually able to be done. We can accomplish these things, because some topical type things are not very doable. The little girl reaching for the rainbow. The real goal there in that is that she has dreams, and that little girl probably grew up to be somebody that had big dreams and wanted to do impossible things. I have a daughter who's like that wants to do incredible, impossible, world-changing things, and I'm not going to discourage her for doing that. she'll find something that is possible to do and she'll get it done. She may not be able to grab a rainbow and pull it in, but she'll get something done. But let's look for doable goals, and they become more doable as we talk rationally about them. Make statements that indicate a future together. We are going to resolve this conflict. Once we get past this with a good solution, use this kind of talk. Show interdependence in your talk. Use we language. Our, we, together, not I and me, and it's all about me. We want to show interdependence in our language of how we talk about. And talk about this as if it's an ongoing process. Recognize that things could change. We're going to look back on this. It's a process. We may have more conflicts even, but we're going to work through them together. The way you talk about conflicts is just incredibly important. And you can see these things happening at the family dinner table, asking your kids about what problems they're having, and openly discussing issues. It starts probably with the parents discussing problems and issues and actually working out conflict in front of the kids, even at the dinner table, without raising the voice, without getting fearful and angry and upset and intimidating and all these negative things, but to show the kids a healthy model of working together to resolve a problem, and just letting them see that every time we can does so much more to help our young people with conflict, and even helping ourselves with conflict as we successfully work through conflict collaboratively, clarifying goals, talking about things, coming up with solutions for problems together creatively. The reward of successfully resolving that conflict then becomes that conditioning that encourages us that when conflict arises next time, we don't run away in fear, we don't get angry, we don't get frustrated, but we dive in and engage, knowing we'll have even a greater reward after resolving that one. But if you can focus on the positive of conflict, and one way to do that is really focusing on these goals, starting to break it down and recognize this is solvable, we can come up with solutions, and if not, we'll work on it together and somehow get through it, whether it's through a compromise or even through somebody having to give in a certain situation. All right, I'm hoping this lecture wasn't too long for you here today. A lot of material in this chapter. Read it closely, and then we'll move on to our next one. Thanks a lot for listening. You have a great day.